Make the dollar circulate.
Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Araceli, aka Chelly, and today on Chelly's Mental Wealth, we're going to be talking about interventions and coping skills that help tackle traumatic events or anyone that's dealing with some type of trauma in a child, okay? Because it does differentiate a little bit from an adult and a child, because the child is really not willing to do certain things that an adult would. It's a little harder to convince kids to do some of the techniques that I might recommend towards an adult, okay? I'm also going to be providing some interventions and coping skills that a teacher or a mental health professional could implement in the classroom or in their home setting or in their professional setting. And yeah, and then I'm basically gonna give some interventions and coping skills so that they are able to do that too and help them understand how they can help a child that's been through some type of traumatic event, okay? So let's get started. All right, so the first thing that's on my list, okay, because I gotta write this because it's a lot for kids. There's a lot of things that I've done with. Okay, so the main thing is figuring out what their trigger is. Kids, it's really hard for them to talk because they don't know. It's hard for them to describe what they're feeling. So their symptoms and behaviors are gonna come out differently when they're getting reminded by their trauma. So first things first, you gotta figure out where that trigger is coming from. Like, talk to them, kind of help them talk to the process, and hopefully if you know what traumatized them, then you guys can talk about the trigger, and that kind of goes under the same lines as talk therapy. So if you don't feel comfortable having your child talk to a therapist, then I would really recommend for you to talk to your child about the traumatic event and ask how they're doing, checking in about it, asking them how they feel, asking them if they felt nervous or reminded by it. What did they do? Reminding them about their coping skills. Like, basically you would have to be like the behavioral specialist and therapist if you are not willing to go, you know, take your child to talk to a therapist, or maybe your child is scared to go talk to a therapist. That could be the case too. But I think that figuring out the trigger and then helping them rationalize those thoughts is the main step, okay? It starts with the parent, because the parent is gonna help communicate that to the teacher or to the babysitter or to the family member or to the whole family. So figuring out that trigger, and then hopefully you guys together can help figure out what coping skills and interventions can work for the child itself, okay? For whenever they get triggered and they get nervous and anxious, okay? So one of the interventions and coping skills, now we're gonna jump into interventions and coping skills, okay? Finding the right coping skill intervention. So one recommendation is the deep breathing cocoa technique. I found this technique when I was trying to look for certain ways to really help a child get excited about deep breathing, because it's so hard to convince kids to deep breathe unless it's at a certain age. Like when they're really little, like around the age of 4, 6, or 7, like they're kind of excited. But by the time they're like around 7, 8, or 9, it's kind of like, no, that doesn't work for me. Or if they've been receiving services for a while and they've been taught that, it's kind of like it's been burned out for them. So this cocoa technique, it's kind of fun for a kid, and I've done it for some teens where they feel like, oh wow, that is kind of funny, and it does kind of like brings more of a laughter and enjoyment into deep breathing. So the cocoa breathing technique consists of, you pretend you have a hot cocoa and you breathe in the cocoa, and then you blow out your cocoa so it cools down. And that's how you can teach that technique to your child. And you can tell them, whenever you feel nervous, smell your cocoa and then blow on your cocoa to cool it down, because it's a hot cocoa. And sorry if you hear my mocos, you guys, I'm really sick right now. So that technique, it works wonders with a lot of kids, and I really would recommend for a lot of just mental health professionals or even teachers, anyone that really works with kids. It's a really great technique for you guys to recommend, and it's really fun. It's just really fun. It's really cute, and a lot of kids like it. So breathing techniques, if you guys don't want to do that, that's fine. Teaching them just why it's important to breathe, like what I usually tell my clients and just kids in general is, the reason why it's important to breathe in and out is because you're giving the correct oxygen to your brain in order for them to rationalize your thoughts. And your brain is like, you're giving the right fuel to your brain, like you're giving the right oxygen, so they're like, oh my gosh, because your brain is working pretty hard because a flight or fight response is being turned on because you're nervous because of that traumatic situation, and now you're really anxious. So deep breathing, okay? meditation falls under that. Like teaching your kids how to meditate will work wonders. I've seen a lot of things on Pinterest where you can do exercises with kids. I'm gonna do a separate video on that because I think it's important. Yeah, I'm gonna do separate videos on all the interventions because I could give you guys a list of things, but modeling them for you guys and showing you guys is something completely different, and that's what's gonna come in the future. But I am just gonna give you guys a list, and hopefully it'll prompt you guys to try it out yourselves. Or maybe if you're a kid, you could tell your mom or your dad that, hey mom, I want to try this out, or look, I heard this is gonna help me. If I do these techniques, we should try it, you know? So sensory items also works really, really well with kids. The fidget spinners, fidget cube, sand, I've noticed that works really well. Like sensory, sand works really well. Squishies, I don't know if you guys heard about squishies. Squishies is like a really soft little, like, it's just really soft. It's like a stress ball, but it's so soft, and you just squeeze, and it's so soft. It's like if you use that as a coping skill, you squeeze it and it calms you down. That's a coping skill in itself, you guys. So those are other options. And like I said, I'm gonna do videos specifically just targeting all these interventions on its own, like, because it takes about 5 to 10 minutes, 15-minute video to really go into full detail as to how these interventions can be worked on and applied on, or how you can teach your child. Like, let's say you want to learn and I could teach you, you know? So that's what's coming in the future. Slow exposure is something that I've done with my clients. An example that I can give you is one of my clients were really scared of dogs. So what I started doing is I started bringing my dog, but I left it in the car. So because they had a really traumatic experience with the dog. So I left the dog in the car, and then afterwards I kept asking my client, you know, is it okay? Do you want me to bring it out here? And then they started feeling comfortable having the dog outside, but they were inside the house, and then gradually they were able to go outside the home and see the dog and feel comfortable, and then eventually we were able to bring the dog inside the home, and them being inside like the same room, as long as the dog was in a leash. So, and that was big for the family. That is a very slow exposure. It's gonna take time, and if they continue to do that after I left, that slowly, eventually not be as terrified when they see a dog. That's an exposure example that you can do. It's gradually exposing your child and helping them with their coping skills. Like if you're gonna do an exposure exercise, you have to make sure that they have their coping skills and interventions that they trust and they know they work. Because you just can't assume that it's working. You gotta make sure, like, does this really work? You gotta see it in action to make sure that it is working, so that they're not lying to you. Because I would hate for them to try to people please. Sometimes they will people please you, and I tell this to my clients all the time. Please tell me the truth if this is not working for you, because I don't want to waste my time if we're practicing this coping skill and trying to make it a habit and then it's not working. So really, really advocate for them to tell you the truth, because I don't want them to tell you, yeah, it's working, and they're just trying to please you, and they're trying to make you mad. So, and you gotta be really patient. Be patient, don't yell, be calm, because that's not gonna help. You gotta be really patient. Also, you gotta give them space if they need it. You gotta ask. One of the main things that you have to ask is, how can I help you? Like if you tried everything and it's just like going down the drain, like, oh my God, like you gotta ask them, how can I help you then? What do you want me to do to help you calm down? Like, what's gonna help? They might be able to articulate and say, just give me some space, or I need a deep breathe. Help me deep breathe. And maybe you can model for them how to deep breathe, so that reminds them and it calms down. Maybe they'll ask for a hug. You never know. Maybe they'll say something completely out of the ordinary that you were surprised about it, but it's gonna help out the situation. You never know. But communication is a big thing. Giving them space when they need it is a big thing as well, okay? And rationalizing their thoughts too, because I know that when they're younger, once you get them comfortable to talk, they will say what they think, and that's key. It's harder when they don't want to talk. So when the child is traumatized and it's hard for them to talk, I would recommend writing it, like saying, okay, write it down, or use your body language. Nod your head, shake your head, shrug your shoulders. Because sometimes someone might be going through something so bad that they shut down and they don't want to talk at all. Well, recommend them to use their body language. I realize that works a lot, and it helps. It really does. And then praising them every time they are able to use their coping skill and intervention. Praising them is a big deal, you guys. Praise. As an adult, if you're trying to help the child or teen, praising them is a big deal, because it builds up their boost esteem, and then it'll kind of reinforce, like, okay, I gotta do it, you know, and it makes them happy that they were able to reach their goal, and they're not constantly thinking about how, I messed up, or I feel sad again, or like I'm scared again, or anxious, or I'm shutting down because I'm reminding myself of whatever happened to me that made me feel traumatized. So that, you guys, okay? And if you're a kid, show this video to your parents so that maybe this can kind of help them support you in a different way that maybe they're not used to supporting, because a lot of the times we as parents, we just are so overwhelmed and busy and stressed out that we lose our marbles for like the dumbest things. So I apologize for that. Okay, so another thing obviously is listen. You gotta listen to them. Listen, be supportive. My son was terrified of Chuck E. Cheese. He was really traumatized over Chuck E. Cheese because he watched Friday Nights at Freddy, and every time he would go to Chuck E. Cheese, he literally ran out. Like, he ran out of the premises. He ran out of Chuck E. Cheese, and I had to sit him down and I said, this is not healthy. You're running away, because the fact that you're that scared is traumatizing you. So we need to talk about this. Why are you so scared of this thing? And I kept reminding him, Chuck E. Cheese, the guy it's a person under there. It's not a real animal. It's the same thing as Disneyland. I try to help him understand that, and that helped in some sense. And then he did tell me that he kept watching Friday Nights at Freddy, and it kept reinforcing his fear. So he was honest enough to tell me the truth. So I told him, you can't be watching that anymore, because if it's traumatizing you and it's really scaring you that much, you need to not watch it. And I told him, if you watch it, I'm gonna have to give you a consequence. And that's how I ended up nipping that in the butt. But he was scared of Chuck E. Cheese for 3 years. Like, he was terrified of that mouse, and I kept having to rationalize with him and having to remind him, and now he's not terrified. Now he knows. Now he knows. But that's a small example. Being supportive, talking about it, and going through their thoughts, okay? Because a lot of the times we have our irrational thoughts, and they're gonna believe their irrational thoughts just how we believe our own irrational thoughts as an adult. So, and the last thing that it says right here is, it takes time, you guys. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of time and patience. It's a lot of trial and error figuring out things. Another recommendation I could give to you guys is bubbles. I've seen it in that website that they talked about on my other video. She talked about bubbles, and it's so true. Doing bubbles together helps learn how to breathe, because you're like, you're blowing bubbles, and it's another really great way of reinforcing how to take deep breaths and learning how to be calm. And then it helps a way for you guys to build a more healthier relationship between you guys. Because remember, Dr. Nadine kept saying healthy relationships, right? So that counteracts. That's like you're doing two things at once. You're building a relationship with your child, and you're blowing bubbles, and you're helping learn how to take deep breaths. Like, she's doing that, and then you can kind of highlight them, or he's doing that. They can highlight that. Oh, hey, look, see how you're blowing your bubbles? That's how you do it when you're taking deep breaths. Or, are you feeling nervous? Let's pull out our bubbles so we could blow our bubbles so you could calm down. Do it that way. Have your bubbles in stack, have them ready. Like, you're feeling nervous, let's blow our bubbles. Let's blow our bubbles. So bubbles is another great intervention that you can try, and it's really, really fun. Kids love bubbles. Blow them. Don't buy a I think those are relaxing, but defeats the purpose, okay? So, or have the bubble machine and then start blowing them too at the same time. What's another thing? Oh, changing your environment is another thing great. If your child is in a toxic environment, or they're constantly being stressed out, that's not going to help with their progress. So being aware of your surroundings and realizing, okay, this is not really healthy for my kid, or I need to communicate to my family member that yelling or screaming it's traumatizing them, and they need to be mindful of their tone of voice, and also to recognizing in their child like certain triggers and things like that. So that's why I'm gonna jump into family therapy. I feel like family therapy it's an intervention in itself. Like, family therapy really helps well with kids, because it helps the kid kind of have a voice, and it helps kind of regulate the situation so you guys can talk and rationalize and kind of help communicate in a different way, or help hash out certain things that you guys weren't able to really talk, because maybe you were raised in a family where you guys don't really talk about certain things, or maybe you don't like the way that they communicate. I don't know, it could be the communication style. Having a professional can help kind of pause and kind of help them say, hey, so did you understand what they said? Like, did you understand what they said? And if they didn't, the therapist has kind of helped them understand, well, this is what they were trying to tell you. and then they can have their chance to say how they felt or what they think, in a sense. So family therapy, I think, is a huge intervention, and I think it's super important. Now, if we want to talk about it in the classroom setting, one of the things they kept mentioning is having really soft music and lowering down the lights in the classroom setting kind of helps calm a child and a teen if they're coming from a very toxic environment or being in a stressful situation. So that's the tip that they've suggested in a classroom setting for teachers, staff, or mental health professionals that they can do in their own office or work setting. They also recommended that it's important for staff to talk about and support each other about their own traumas, like have a staff community meeting so that you guys can support and talk about each other's, or talk about their feelings and their own trauma. So because they basically explain that staff can support each other so that the staff can support the kids and their clients. So it works hand in hand. It's like a cycle. It's kind of like, how are we not as adults gonna manage our own traumas and our own biases and our own, troubles, and expect that we're gonna be able to help our client? We're human. We're not perfect. And I don't care what anybody says, we all mess up once in a blue moon, and sometimes our biased views comes through. Sometimes we have our bad days, sometimes we're sad, and sometimes we need to do our own coping skills interventions. Sometimes we need to take care of ourselves in order to take care of other people, and that never stops. I don't understand that concept, in a sense, where people think that, oh, I went through school and I went through all this stuff and I'm okay and I'm able to provide help for kids or just adults in general. I think it's important that as anyone who works with kids, or just in general that works in the mental health field, it's important that we continue to take care of ourselves, seek our own therapy, seek whatever interventions and coping skills we need to do to make sure that we're okay whenever we're not okay. Because sometimes we're not okay, and that's just the reality of it. That's like not normal for us to be happy dandy 24/7. Like, sometimes we're gonna have our bad days, and it's important that we're ready for our coping skills and interventions during that time. So we as adults, by modeling positive coping skills and intervention, is the main thing, you guys, for a child in general. That's just point blank. The best thing that you can do for a child is you model the best interventions and coping skills that you can do or recommend to them that's going to work for them, for their personality. Because your interventions and coping skills may not work for your child, but I think it's important that you guide them and you teach them in a sense of figuring out what works for them. That's my biggest advice and suggestion that I can give to parents that are trying to help their child overcome a traumatic experience with their symptoms and behaviors. And to wrap it up, I want to remind you guys, and I'm going to keep saying this, is interventions and coping skills are not a one-size-fits-all. It's trial and error. Interventions and coping skills don't work for everywhere. There's not one coping skill is going to be like, yes, that works for everyone. I think the only one that I could say is meditation. I think meditation can work literally for anyone at any age. Literally any age, because it's like self-talk. But other than that, all the other rest of interventions and coping skills may not work for you, but it may work for somebody else. So that's why I recommend so many different kinds, and a lot of them are pretty repetitive. They're very repetitive. It's always the same type of exercises and coping skills interventions, and sometimes new ones just come and it's just like, wow, this is a great idea, like I never thought about this, So, and the last one that I do want to add on to is, this is a really great intervention that my supervisor recommended me to recommend to a clinician, because she realized that because I'm not a therapist, it was out of my scope. And I think this is a really good intervention for any mental health provider that's willing to try it. Well, let me paint this picture. So when we go to trauma, right? When we go to trauma, we describe that trauma, we get these memories and we put them in the back of our head and we put them in a box and we lock it up, right? And we don't talk about it. When that happens, that's when all these symptoms and behaviors start to unfold. So this exercise that she described was, why don't you get a box, okay? And in this box, put a bunch of things in there, like it could be maybe little rocks or something that's gonna create some heaviness, okay? And put it around their neck, in a sense. And of course, I don't want you guys to like choke your client, but put it around like maybe a box, in a sense of where you can have it and then hold it, like a box and a string, right? And then slowly dump a bunch of stuff that, metaphorically put a bunch of stuff in that box and explain to them, like, this is what you're carrying right now, all of this inside this box. Do you feel how heavy it is? Why don't we try to empty one out every time we come, so that the box becomes lighter and you're not controlled by those traumatic events or that main traumatic event. And that really kind of helps metaphorically help the client understand, like, wow, that is true. I feel the heaviness on my body. Sometimes people need to feel it. You know, some people are visual learners, some people are listeners, right? Some people need to see it, some people need to feel it. You know, everybody's different. So I think that intervention in itself is really, really great technique that anyone can use if you're in the mental health profession that you will want to try with your client to kind of help them be more comfortable with talking about their traumatic situations and events. Because I know that with trauma, sometimes it's just, majority of the time, it's really, really just hard to talk about it. So talking about it is the main thing. I think also too that you will always hear me say is helping your child talk about the traumatic event. If you guys can't, then, or encouraging them to go seek a therapist. And if they don't want to go seek a therapist, I would recommend for you to go with them and have family therapy with them, or you go to therapy so you model for your child. That works like crazy. When your child sees you go to therapy, they're like, oh, okay, and then it's working. Oh, like it's already building that bridge and that awareness and breaking that bias or stereotype that, like, oh, like every time you go to therapy you're wrong, or you know what I mean. Like it's making it more of a norm. So it's gonna help your child go to therapy too if you model those behaviors for them too. Okay, now I'm gonna look at my list and making sure that I don't forget anything. Talk about it to therapy, family therapy. Okay, watch for cues. Oh, and I did talk about that, like watching for cues. You have to be really aware of their cues when their fight or flight response gets turned on, because sometimes they may not know when their flight or response will turn on, and you kind of have to help them, like, oh, I see that cue whenever they need to go to the restroom, or whenever they start to cry, or they refuse to go into a certain location, or they refuse to get out of the car, is, you know, that's a cue, like, oh, they're getting nervous, their anxiety is getting triggered. So I gotta practice the coping skills with her and help her or him with making that a habit. Okay, so I really hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you guys are new to my channel, please do not forget to subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you guys know when my next video will come out. Don't forget to poke that button. Don't forget to poke it, okay, if you guys like my video. And please comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about the recommendations and interventions and coping skills that I provided to you guys. Like I said, I am gonna make completely separate videos for each coping skill to the T, very detailed, like I do with my clients, so that hopefully people could go back and look into them. Yeah, so stay tuned for those videos, you guys. And thank you guys so much for still being here and supporting this channel. And I really appreciate you guys for your interest and just willing to just want to get better at your mental health and your own personal journey. And I hope that this video can help in some way. And don't forget to share this too as well for someone that might need help within their child, or within maybe a parent that's having trouble with their kid. These interventions and coping skills could be useful to them. So I'm gonna stop talking. Like I always say, I will see you guys in my next video. Have a nice day. See you later. Talk to you later, alligator. Bye bye.